Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Outside, the art and science of watch collection. Today we're going to be talking about Hamilton watches, and one of the things that I hesitate to talk about, but I will because there's some aspects to it. There's a lot of discussion about the history of a watch company. It says, "Oh, this watch is really good because it has a great history." It simply's got a name from a history. I, I say that because so many watch companies today were totally transformed over the years so that they're really the watches they make today only have what we might say a ghost of a resemblance to the original watchmakers for a lot of reasons. Most of the reasons are good reasons because the materials and the workmanship and everything else has improved, except for the handcrafted. And those are sort of like having your original artwork. Okay, but Hamilton doesn't fall in that category. Hamilton is a good example of standard horology, but there are a lot of really interesting things about it that I think that if you're thinking of getting a Hamilton, there's some neat ones I think that are worth having and worth finding out about. First of all, well, just as a sort of a background, from 1892 to 1969, it was pretty much running out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Then there was a transition period between about 1969 and 1974. Now, Hamilton bought a Swiss watch company called Buren. And in making the Hamilton watches after that, they used watch materials and parts from both companies. Some of the Buren watches were using American-made Hamilton parts, and some Swiss parts were now finding their way into Hamilton watches that was still mainly located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. One of the notable inventions that came up then was a Buren, what was called the Micro-rotor, and that was sort of cool. A little rotor inside that it did make a certain difference. Now, in 1971, Hamilton was purchased by Omega and Tissot, which was a holding company, and then by 1984, they become part of the Swatch group, and so that's really what we're dealing with is something that does have a history, but only specks of that history are left. All right, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because some of those specs are very interesting. All right, now to get started, what I want to do is that since I like hand-wound mechanical watches the best, I thought that's what I'll start with. By the way, I'm wearing my Maurice Lacroix masterpiece, which has the Jacquet 736 in it that I like. There's a 763. It's one of those two. Anyhow, the first one I want to look at the wind-up. They don't have too many wind-up ones, and I think they're all part of the Khaki, what they're called Khaki Field Mechanical. And one of the things about watches, your really good watches like this Beauvais, pretty much fill up the case with the movement because the case and the movement were made to go together. Whereas most of your standard horology, they put in a movement that fits whatever need they have for that particular watch. Now, one thing about Hamiltons, if you buy a Hamilton and you look through their catalog online, you get two things I think that are important. One is the price, and the other is the movement they're using. And I'll be talking more about the movement in a bit. Okay, so this Khaki Field Mechanical is a 38 millimeter watch, $475, and it's got the ETA 2801-2 in it. And it itself is about 25.6 millimeters itself. Now, if you look up in the corner there, it has movement to case ratio. And when you look at something like this, it's almost 1-to-1. And that ratio is, you can see that the movement and the case simply happen to go together. One happened to fit the other, and that's why you have it in there. But I sort of like this watch, and so I thought I'd include it. It's one of their mechanical watches. And like I said, I like mechanical watches. Now, one of the new ones, this one came out, I think it's out in 2018. Now, here's another example. This is another wind-up they have called a Khaki Field Mechanical Limited Edition. And this one has the ETA 2804 in it, and it's a different ETA model, and it was needed because they wanted to have a date window. But you can see there's a little bitty date window just to the left of the 3, at the left of 3 o'clock. But you can see how far in it is, and that's because if you look at the up at the top up there, you can see that it looks like a little fried egg, and you can see how small the movement is relative to the size of the case. And the reason that the same movement isn't used as before is simply because this one's got a little date wheel in it. This is a big watch. This is 50 millimeters, 4 hertz, 28,800 VPH, vibrations per hour. And it's only 25.60 millimeters itself. It's not very big. Well, that's almost literally half the size of that 50 millimeter case it goes into. This watch, by the way, sells for $1,145. Now, what I started doing, I thought, well, here looks to be, would be an ideal. Here you got these great big watches. You got ETA is owned by Swatch as well. So here you have the Hamilton watch, and Swatch can put in any ETA they want to into it. And so I was thinking, why didn't they put in a bigger movement, something like the Unita 6497 or 6498? Well, what I found out is that they used to. Okay, and I'm not sure why they changed it, but they did. In part, I can understand why. It doesn't have a date wheel with it, and I guess they didn't want to modify it so it would. But this is a nice big movement. It runs at 2.5 hertz, and to me, this is another thing that's very attractive for a number of reasons. First of all of the top watchmakers, the ones I can't afford, all have this 2.5 hertz, 18,000 VPH, and most of them do, not all of them. But you find these lower speeds, whereas the other ones, and the new ones we just looked at, were both 4 hertz, and this one's 2.5 hertz. All right. Well, what happened to this watch? And when you look at the movement to case ratio, well, that fills it up pretty well. It's because you've got a lot of stuff in there for timekeeping. It's got as a 6497. It has the small seconds over at 9 o'clock, and otherwise it's pretty standard looking watch. But it's got a great big, nice, the Unita CTA 6497-1. The -2 is 3 hertz. This one's 2.5 hertz. And then when you flip it over, you can see they have a little window that just shows a regulator, and it shows, well, and I suppose the balance wheel. You can see through that little window too. Now this one sells for $400, which is less than either one. Now, I found this. You can find these online, brand new, but they don't make them anymore. Okay, but it's one of the things that I like about different watch companies, especially the ones that are involved in pretty standard horology, is that they do use different quality of ETA movements. Now, ETA, beside having they have different standards of quality based on the number of adjustments that they have. But they also have a hierarchy that they have quartz and then mecaline, and then it's mecaline specialties, and then they have the chronographs. Well, the new ones, they put in the mecaline, which is the less expensive ones than the mecaline specialties. And the mecaline specialties. The 6497 is a mecaline specialty. So it's sort of an interesting thing, and you can get the watch with what ETA considers a better movement for less money. It's only $400. I think the other one that I like is I think it's $475 for the new one. Now it's smaller. It's 38 millimeters. This one's 44. All right, so it's something I like to look at. Now here, what I did is that if we put these, if we set them up and look at them, here we find the Khaki field mechanical with the 2801, the big 50 millimeter Khaki field mechanical limited edition. It's got the 2804 with the date wheel. And then if you look at the older ones, and it's not that much older. I mean, it's like new millennial. It's just a little older, where they were using the Unius ETA 6497. So at least for someone like myself, who likes the hand wound, I'd go after the older one, because it's got, what in my opinion, and actually ETA's opinion, a better movement. All right. Let's take a look now. They have a lot of different groups, styles, and so forth. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to go into some depth with one group called Jazzmaster, and we'll take a look at it. And then we'll take a look at the other ones, but not as in much detail. Now, the Jazzmaster style has several more than this, but this pretty much covers it. You've got what they call the open heart, which gives you a sort of partial view of the movement. You get an idea of it. It's got a regulator. This one is the regulator cinema that happens to be a new one. And next to it has H10 and H12, and then over at the Mastero, Mastero, I can't say it, Chrono H21. Maestro, I think is how you say it, and it's 1745. But it says H10, H12, and H21. Well, what are those? Well, these are ETA movement bases with a Hamilton, something for Hamilton that was specially done for them. And the reason I say that is that Hamilton isn't like some companies that try to hide what they have. If they've got a ETA in it, they'll say it's an ETA. When you look at these other ones with the H designation, they tend to be ETAs with something about them that's a little different, but they do have ETA bases. Now, you take the GMT model of the Jazzmaster, and it's a dual time watch with the world time around the dial on it, and it's got an ETA 2893-2. The thin line, which is very much of a dress watch, the one I'm showing's got the metal bracelet on it instead of gator or leather, and it runs $995. Now these are, after talking about, I think recently we talked about the FP Journe Chronomint Blue. Used, they start around 30,000, whereas brand new, I think you can buy them for 22, and you can't get them. So it's sort of an interesting difference between the standard horology and the exceptional horology of FP Journe. Okay, And then the thin lines, it's got a 2892, as I mentioned. Then the Power Reserve has an H13 in it, which is another designation by Hamilton, and it's got a Power Reserve. All of these are automatics. The only ones I'm taking a look at are either automatics or mechanical. I'm not talking about the quartz. I have nothing against them. It's just I don't have time to cover them as well. But these are all automatics with one of the classes or one of the groups of watches from Hamilton. Now, in order to decode Hamilton calibers, you have to go to some place like watchbase.com. And so if an H10, for example, you'll first see a ETA caliber CO7.611. No idea what that is, but the base of that is fairly well known, 2824-2. H12, the caliber, again, the base caliber for that's a 2825-2. H13, now this one was sort of interesting because it was slowed down to 3 hertz. It's an 80-hour one, H13, and it's got a presumably 2824, ETA 2824 base. The reason I say presumably, it was deducted. 2 different writers were talking about it and say, well, this is what they use with their Tissot that for their 80-hour one. So it's probably the same. It may not be. The 813 may be who knows what. Okay, and finally, the H21 has a base caliber of ETA caliber 7750, also known as the Valjoux 7750. Very good automatic caliber. So if you want to find out what these are, and if you're buying a watch for, these things they run between about 500 and up. I would say roughly, if you're not getting into precious metals, maybe 1,500 would be 1,1700 near the top of these things. Still, that's a lot of money. So you want to know what you're getting. All right. Now here are the other parts of their collection. I left out the Jazzmaster, and they have the ones, the American Classic. They have Khaki Aviation, Khaki Field Auto, Khaki Navy Frogman. Then they have one called the Ventura. Now, the thing about Ventura that's really interesting to me is that this was a design from 1957 when it was Hamilton was the original Hamilton, I'll put it that way. And so you have this unusual triangular-shaped, not only dial, but case along with it. Then you have one, this one is a Broadway, and it happens to be a chronograph, but you have chronographs in the Khaki Navy, and the Khaki Aviation, the Khaki Field. All of them have that, and probably have some of these others as well. So if you're interested in a Hamilton, you got a lot to choose from, believe me. And I think the best I can do is sort of give you an introduction to it. You're getting a Swiss movement. They're varying degrees of quality. The watches themselves, I don't think they cut any more corners than any other standard horology. They just use certain things and make a lot of them. Okay, it's a very different kind of company now, and part of a much bigger one, and it's got Swiss movements in it. So anyhow, if you're interested in a Hamilton, couple things that you should know. One, how that you can get some really good buys on these with, in my opinion, better movements in some of the older ones, which means you're going to save a lot of money, okay, which is a good thing, all right? The other thing is you have a wide selection, a huge selection, and depending on what you want to use it for, you can buy them new or used, or to me, the best of all worlds is get one that is old stock. I mean, it's never been used, condition 0, and get it for a really good price. I saw some great prices everywhere for Hamiltons. Joma's shop was where I found one that I liked a lot. So anyway, it's worth investigating, and I think it's a brand that's worth thinking about. So anyway, until Sunday, this is Bill Sanders with Watch Outside, the art and science of watch collection. And by the way, this is an opportunity if you want to subscribe, but also more important is I'd love to hear your comments. That's the most important thing to me. If you have Hamiltons, I'd like to hear what you have to think. If you're thinking of getting one, tell us about your search. That's all for now.